the person that says they don't like blacks or Mexicans or whomever, those persons haven't done anything to them. They've heard that. Their friends don't like this person. Their parents don't like this person. All that is learned behavior.
Absolutely.
It's learned behavior. You don't come into the world hating anyone.
I think we've gotten away from truth and being pragmatic, wanting to embrace a melting pot theory when America is not a melting pot.
I love my white friends, but boy, I sometimes they just put me in the position where I'm speaking for all black people in America, and I can't do that.
Who we allow to influence us. Because I'd be willing to bet the average person that has a dislike for any person has not experienced a negative action from that person. Most oftentimes, we gravitate or hold on to, if the apostle and I are friends and someone comes along and says something negative about him, 9 chances out of 10, I'm going to be upset about that. Now, that person hasn't done anything to me, but he's done something to my friend. And I think that's kind of like the same. The person that says they don't like blacks or Mexicans or whomever, those persons haven't done anything to them. They've heard that. Their friends don't like this person. Their parents don't like this person. All that is learned behavior.
Absolutely.
It's learned behavior. You don't come into the world hating anyone.
That's right.
But the environment that you grow in produces whatever thought process you may have. And then your educational background, all those things influence how we associate with other folks, with other people.
Your relationships that you have are key to knocking down all kinds of walls, because if you actually have a relationship with someone that is different than you just have a different perspective. You're not going off of what someone else tells you or what you see somewhere else, because you're like, yeah, but I've had this experience and it wasn't that way with me. And relationships, getting to know people and learning about other people is that's kind of what this here is for. And that's the only way to really break down a lot of those walls and barriers.
But when you live in a culture or an environment that nurtures negativity and biases, I can remember growing up, born in the 50s, growing up in the 60s, a lot of what you saw on the news, the media, movies portrayed African Americans, particularly in a negative, stereotypical manner. Either they were step and fetcher type characters, they were lazy, they were shiftless. I grew up loving the Tarzan movies, but I always thought it was kind of strange that you had this white guy swinging through the jungles of Africa, but he could talk to the elephants, he could talk to the lions and all the animals, and they obeyed his voice. But then you had all these black folk, indigenous to the continent, who were terrified of these same animals, couldn't talk to them, couldn't control them, couldn't relate to them. And so you grew up with these images, and it's been perpetuated in our educational system. Churches, notoriously guilty as well. Every positive image, if it's something good, it had to always be either white or near white. But if it was negative, the devil was always spoken of in dark terms. And good lie is a little white lie, but if it's a bad lie, it was a black lie. So we've helped to perpetuate the problem. I think has been exacerbated by the fact that we still have individuals, you mentioned relationships, who, and I agree with Pastor Coleman, nobody's born into this world just hating someone. But when everybody around you, your relationships are telling you, You can't trust these people. You can't trust those folk, or beware of them. And then we've also internalized it ourselves as an ethnic group in this nation, where we've learned to distrust one another.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I encourage our entire
That's real true.
congregation. You know, I try to push certain books. I'm pro-education, pro-learning, pro gathering knowledge and information. Two of the books that I said, hey, y'all need to read Black Wall Street. Then I followed up with, you need to read the Willie Lynch papers, because
Yeah.
people don't understand why we have such a deep feeling of distrust across the board. So we taught black people to distrust themselves. White folk have been taught to distrust black people. Black people have been taught to, well, you gotta keep your eye on white folk or Latinos or Asian. And so we have America, and you mentioned the fact that America was a dream, the concept is an ideal. But people have, I think we've gotten away from truth and being pragmatic, wanting to embrace a melting pot theory when America is not a melting pot. Nor, and this is again my humble opinion, I don't want it to be a melting pot. I want to know that it's okay for folk to have been blessed by God to look different skin textures, different ethnicities, different cultures. Those things are not necessarily be tolerated, but celebrated. And we can't really do that when we don't understand that Black Lives Matter. And again, this is me. In my mind, it's not an organization, but it is a concept. We're saying, listen, and I agree with people when they say all lives matter. I have no problem with that. When you say that, what I believe should be followed up, then act like all lives do matter, and don't say all lives matter except Black lives or any other lives. You know, it's not to me a movement of hate. And I would dare to venture out. I have no statistics to back up what I'm going to say, but I'm rather confident that statistically it will bear out. Most people that you see participating in a Black Lives Matter protest, march, or what have you, don't belong to anybody's organization. But there are people who've come together and say, we agree. Let's at least look at the situation and admit we have some problems. And I'm like Pastor Coleman, haven't had the opportunity to minister and to conduct crusades, leadership seminars in Africa, several African nations. As many problems as America has, and you would never get me to say that America is a perfect nation. We have some problems in America, but I would still rather live in America than any place else on the planet. I love America. I love this nation. We have problems, and I think we need to pragmatically sit down and look at those problems and confront it. Sometimes you just have to own it.
Yeah.
You know, if I make a mistake, then I have to own that. I can't have an accident where I was on my cell phone, but I want to blame the car that crossed my path because I didn't see him, because he should have stopped for me. I have to own it. You know, I did it. Now let's see what we can do to fix it. And until we really recognize that everybody matters, we're going to continue to have these discussions and these problems. You know, you would think, you know, watching the civil rights era, and I grew up in Chicago, but I spent my summers down here. But I'm always watching the news because Cairo was on the news every evening because the National Guard had been deployed because of the civil rights movement and the problems that were occurring not only in Cairo, but in Southern Illinois. And so one of the things that I look at now, I think about what Dr. King said, that we have to learn to live together as brothers or we will perish together as fools.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that, and I think that it's, you know, Lynn, you had said that it's frustrating because you say you feel like you're done talking and we need to move, but I would tell you that until watching the first conversation where Dr. Barnett, Pastor Barnett, were talking about, and even what you've said now, still understanding it. Social media has been rough on trying to understand what Black Lives Matter means, and so unfortunately. It's uncomfortable for me to say this, that it's like I didn't hear everything about Black Lives Matter in the right context. And it's almost like I would describe it as I heard an extra word that wasn't there. Black Lives Matter more. No one ever said that. But yet what I felt like I was getting through social media was that's why then people would start saying all lives matter. I was like, no, that's not it. And talking about, we don't worry about when you say breast cancer matters or lung cancer matters, that doesn't negate that, you know, all cancer sucks. I mean, that is how it is. so we don't argue about that. But that has been brought into the Black Lives Matter discussion. It's not saying, like you said, all lives matter, but Black Lives Matter need the attention right now. All cancer's bad, but we're going to talk about breast cancer today. And I never got that through social media or through any other format until I could hear a conversation like we're having today. And then to get to where we can move forward, we've got to at least understand those things so that we know what it means. I like your statement, Dr. Barnett, saying Black Lives Matter is real. It's not so much an organization. It's just that's what we need to focus on.
I don't think Black Lives Matter can be defined in one descriptive point, though.
Right.
Amen.
Each one of us, as blacks on the dais here, have a different thought process, idea what about Black Lives Matter means to them. And it's based on what we've experienced as a black person, most oftentimes.
And that's what I meant about being tired. I mean, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be asked. I'm honored to be on this panel with these esteemed guests. But there's a real fatigue that comes along with being who I am. And especially in this season, I mentioned I wear several hats. I'm an attorney. I work with a lot of folks that are what's called legally indigent. So I work in the court system, and I see a lot of the things. I think you mentioned incarceration. I see that. My lived experience, I see that. I love my white friends, but boy, I sometimes they just put me in the position where I'm speaking for all black people in America. And I can't do that. But I can tell you through my experience, and I'm a relatively young woman, but I've been having these conversations the majority of my life. I've been active in trying to do some things. So that's the fatigue that I mean. All change occurs within a conversation. So we've got to have them. But that's the fatigue I'm living with. You know, white people don't ever have to think about being white. The majority culture is just that. I have to think about whatever situation I'm in, how people are relating to me. Now, is this because I'm black, a woman, or I'm from Grand Chain? So there's at least 3 isms that I deal with regularly. I'm in a profession where only less than 5% in the whole nation are African American attorneys.
And you're a woman.
And I'm a woman, right? So, sister gets tied. But again, you're exactly right. And it is worth it being out here on a Saturday evening if you get it, if one person gets it, then that's the change, right?
Right.
And you're not going to get it unless we have candid, open dialogue that this is a real thing.
Right.
And it's been here and it's not going to go away unless we learn to really, truly love and accept each other.
And Tyrone, I think you'd mentioned that the conversation has been here. It was here 30 years ago. It was here 50 years ago, and other, like in the 60s or whatever other time periods. And so the question is, how we've got to get past this point of making sure that we don't have to still be trying to define Black Lives Matter 10 years from now. If we just have one conversation and then next week we move on to something else, we didn't solve it, and it can't be solved in 1 week or one talk. And that's why, even though we asked this question in Murfreesboro, we ask it again tonight, because it still has to be solved. There's more than one time that we'll have to talk about this to get whether or not it's everybody, but at least to get a majority of the people back on course to understand it, so we have one more universal understanding of it instead of we're fractured with all these different ones.